Hi there, I'm the _twig and I like analysing game rules. Playtest 7 is another big one, although thankfully for me at least it's not 77 pages this time. I'm going to be starting my analysis with the Sorcerer, which gets a few interesting new features and some generally pretty elegant design. It also gives me a chance to talk about all of the new and redesigned spells in the playtest, because Saucy learns them all. First though, if you want to talk to me about the playtest, you can do that by joining my Patreon. I did a big first impressions read through on there, and we've been looking at some of the interesting interactions and options available in the playtest. Special thanks to SK for the extra support he gives. If you want to see some of the stuff that SK helps me do, check out my last video about resourceless builds. We're pretty proud of that one. So, here we are in playtest 7. Looking first at the class table, the Sorcerer has the same improved spell progression that they had in playtest 5, meaning that they'll know at least 7 more spells by the time they reach level 20. Also, they and every other spellcaster is back to using their old 2014 class spell lists. I think this is probably good, if only for more class differentiation. There's a definite design benefit for unified spell lists, but this is more fun, at least in my opinion. I'll talk about the new spells on the Sorcerer list in a bit. Right then, so at level 1, Sorcerer gets a new feature, Innate Sorcery. This is a bonus action which you can use twice per day to increase the DC on your Sorcerer spells by 1, and give you advantage on attack rolls on your Sorcerer spells for a full minute. This is actually excellent. The advantage is nice, but there's quite a few ways to get advantage, even at low level, and as such I'm not too bothered about it. The really big one here is that +1 DC. Some of you may be thinking that that's just an improvement of 5%. If the enemy had 50% chance of failing a save before, now they have 55% chance. And that's true in absolute terms. But in good old statistical D&D, we generally don't care about absolute terms. We care about relative terms. 50 to 55 is actually a 10% relative improvement. This effectively makes all of your save spells around 10% more likely to stick, and that's amazing. There's two other things that I really like about this feature though. First is that it only works on Sorcerer spells. There's no point in dipping Sorcerer 1 on your Cleric to make Spirit Guardians better, because it won't work. This really disincentivises dip multiclassing, which I personally think is healthy for the game. The other great thing about it is that it has no impact on legendary resistance. Now I will say that I don't personally play with legendary resistance. I use Recharging Indomitable instead. But for the vast majority of DMs who do use it, you really don't want saving throw buffs to mess up with legendary resistances. There was a massive kerfuffle when Silvery Barbs first came out, because people thought that it might let you bypass LR. So yeah, big thumbs up for Innate Sorcery from me. Excellent feature, and it really plays into the idea of Sorcerer being the most powerful user of the spells they know. Now at level 2 you get Font of Magic, and just like in playtest 5, this has level limits, meaning that the spell slot you make must be of a level of a spell you could prepare as a Sorcerer. No changes, but I still think this is really good. Also at second level you get Metamagic. In playtest 5 you got 3 Metamagics at second level and another 3 at 13, but you could also swap one out every long rest. Now you get 2 at second level and another 2 at 10th and 17th, and you can swap one out at every level. I have to say, not a fan of this change. It's absolutely better than 2014, that's for sure. But I really like the long rest switch outs, and it's such a slow progression. Personally, I think I'd like a mid-ground of long rest switch outs, 2 at 2, and then 1 more at 6, 10, 14 and 18. I think that would be a nice mixture of versatility and slowed but more constant progression. Before we continue, let's also look at the updated Metamagic options. So first off, Careful, Empowered, Extended, Heightened, Quickened and Transmuted spell are all unchanged since playtest 5. I think this is fine, although I do find it a bit odd that they didn't add Psychic to Transmuted spell, since the new Sorcerer exclusive spells both have Psychic as an option. Onto the changes though, Distant spell is back to its 2014 form, although with a slightly updated syntax. Playtest 5 it increased the spell's range by 30 times your Sorcerer level. I think I slightly preferred the playtest 5 version, but I'm not too bothered either way. Interestingly, Warlock's Eldritch Spear changed in this playtest to take on the 30 times your level effect. Not sure why they reverted one and changed the other. Seeking spell got a really important update, in that it now costs just 1 SP instead of 2. Brilliant! It's no longer weirdly overpriced. Subtle spell got a really small nerf, stating that it no longer replaces costly material components. This is fine. I'm not really a fan of costly non-consumed components, but if they're going to be in the game, they may as well not be avoidable. The biggest change, however, is Twinned spell. This one is actually pretty neat. It only costs 1 SP now and has the same 2014 effect of allowing you to choose multiple targets for a single casting of a spell. but it only works on spells which have an upcasting option, which allows you to choose other targets anyway. In effect, this is a metamagic which lets you improve the spell slot you use to cast some specific spells. Twin Spell doesn't even say that the spell has to have one target anymore, so you could upcast the spell normally to target 2 creatures, and then effectively double upcast with Twinned to target 3 creatures. I've compiled a list of spells on the Sorcerer list that this works on, as well as spells that the Aberrant or Clockwork Sorcerer could access. For me, the standouts are probably Tasha's Mind Whip, Fly, and Banishment, which is still really good even after its nerfing Cleric and Species. I also think that the new and updated Jump is probably a good shout, so let's have a look at Jump. Jump is now a bonus action, 1 minute non-concentration spell which allows the target to spend 10 feet of movement to jump 30 feet. It can also be upcast to choose multiple targets, so works with Twin Spell. In effect, this is a 20-foot walk speed buff, and that's actually quite good. Longstrider is a fairly underrated spell, and this is basically a more powerful, shorter duration version of it. The only change I would like to see is a generic rule stating that the height of a jump does not contribute to any falling damage you might receive. The design team have also said that there will be more spells which use this multi-target upcasting effect, so Twin Spell will have even more uses. Assuming they get these upgrades, I think that some prime candidates for Twin Spell are Suggestion, Levitate, and Telekinesis. I doubt they'll make something like Polymorph twinnable, at least not without heavy nerfs. Right then, back to Sorcerer. At 3 they get their subclass. In this playtest, the options are Aberrant, Clockwork, Draconic, and Wild Magic. Honestly, this was somewhat of a surprise. I was expecting Divine Soul and probably Shadow. Aberrant and Clockwork have not been redesigned, but I'll talk about the other 2 in a bit. At 5th level you now get Sorcerous Restoration. This lets you get back Sorcerer level over 5 SP when you roll initiative with 0 SP. Honestly, not impressed. Pretty much only because it requires you to be at 0. Just let people regain SP every fight if you're going to include this feature. Or I guess, just don't include it at all. That's an option too. This feature in its current state is honestly just encouraging people to waste their SP. After that kind of disappointing feature, we now get a great feature at 7th level, Sorcery Incarnate. This says that if you have run out of uses of your new 1st level feature, Innate Sorcery, you can use it again by spending 2 SP. Lovely! I think that's well worth the cost, assuming you haven't already picked up Heightened Spell as one of your Metamagic options. Sorcery Incarnate has another feature though. While Innate Sorcery is active, you can use 2 Metamagic options when you cast a spell. My first impression of this was that it was kind of niche. That was the case in Playtest 5 as well. Subtle plus anything could be decent, and you might want to use Careful plus Heightened, I guess? But then I realised something interesting. It does not say that you have to use 2 different Metamagics. You could use Double Heightened to give 2 creatures disadvantage on the spell. Or you could use Double Twinned to target 3 creatures for the cost of just 2 SP. At 7th level, by spending a bonus action and 2 SP, a sorcerer can now attempt to cast Banishment on 3 enemies at the same time with a +1 to their DC. This feature is incredibly potent. I think that double twinning is probably not intended, so they should probably change this to clarify that you must use 2 different metamagics. After that great 7th level feature, we jump all the way up to 20th level. There are no core features for Sorcerer from 8 to 19. This 20th level feature is Arcane Apotheosis, which I'm definitely still mispronouncing, and it's received a well-deserved absolute obliteration from the nerf department. It no longer gives you free penalty-free wish. Instead, it now says that when you have Innate Sorcery active, you can use 1 metamagic option per turn for free. That's a really lovely capstone. It's fun, strong, and not game-endingly broken. It just lets you do what you've already been doing more often. So yeah, base Sorcerer, fantastic. Fix up or remove Sorcerous Restoration, and clarify that Sorcery Incarnate's 2 metamagic options must be different, and we're on for an absolute winner. I'd also like to see those changes to metamagic progression that I mentioned, but they aren't of dire importance. Now then, subclasses. As I said, Aberrant and Clockwork are unchanged. These are probably the 2 strongest subs in 2014 5e, and spoiler, they're the strongest subs in Playtest 7 too, and by a wide margin. Draconic Sorcery is actually almost identical to 2014. The only differences are that you can be understood by all dragons, even if they don't speak Draconic, Elemental Affinity's resistance is now permanent, and Draconic Presence is now a non-concentration bonus action, and doesn't have the 24-hour immunity anymore. Draconic Presence is just kind of fine. I don't find it especially exciting, even after that fairly significant buff. And that honestly goes for this entire subclass. Given that Aberrant and Clockwork are here, I'm really surprised that they didn't give Draconic a similar spell list. Wild Magic also doesn't get a spell list, but for this one I don't care. I'm not judging wild magic on how powerful it is. That completely misses the point. I'm judging it on how much variance and chaos it brings to the game. So 3rd level is Wild Magic Surge, which no longer requires DM permission. You can roll that d20 every time you cast a spell if you want. Great. DMs like me can no longer forget, and the Wild Magic Sorcerer can just have fun. They haven't changed the table though, which I really hope they do in the final version, because some of the effects, especially that infamous Aggrojag and the self-target Fireball, are kind of not fun, or could potentially lead to TPKs at low levels. Also at 3rd level is Tides of Chaos, which is completely player driven now. This is probably even better than the Wild Magic Surge change. I will note that Tides of Chaos has less chances to actually use it now that Innate Sorcery already gives you advantage attacks, but you can always use it on saving throws or out of combat skill checks, so that's not too much of a problem. Next up, Bend Luck at 6 got cheaper, so you can help your allies more often. That's nice, always good to be able to do that. Level 14's Control Chaos is unchanged, you still roll on the table twice and pick 1, and I'm happy with that. It's a fun feature. Finally, at 18th level, Wild Bombardment is a new feature replacing the mediocre Spell Bombardment. This lets you pick an effect from the Wild Magic Surge table that either casts a spell or restores SP and then just use it. No roll, you just use the one you want. You then have to wait 1d4 long rest before you can do this again. Honestly, I'm not super impressed by this. It's too predictable, and the only real options are 5th level Magic Missile and Restore All SP. I'd like to see something really crazy here, like forcing everyone on the battlefield to roll wild magic on their next turn. That would be way more fun. So both subclasses are considerably weaker than their Tasha's counterparts, but wild magic is just really fun for the most part, so I don't care. Draconic needs something though. It's just not worth playing right now. Now then, last thing, let's look at the other spells. Sorcerer learns all of these, and 2 of them are unique. Sorcerous Burst has stuck around from Playtest 5 and now has D8 damage dice. This is expecting to do about 5.14 DPR per starting dice, before accounting for accuracy. Slightly less than that actually due to the cap. That's still less than Firebolt's 5.5, but not by much, and you can change the damage type, so I guess this is fine? Personally, I'd probably still prefer Rare Frost though. Next up, Arcane Eruption is identical to Playtest 5, except it's now a deck save. This is a pretty solid spell, so I'm glad to see it stick around. Finally, the big one, Counterspell got a nerf. It's no longer an auto-counter on all spells level 3 or lower, it's a Constitution saving throw. It also doesn't waste the spell slot, only the action. This is a lot more palatable before. It's now never guaranteed, and legendary resistance just completely blocks it. I've been banning Counterspell for years because it's just not fun, but I may try this out and see how it feels. I will say that I'm not hopeful. I still think that it's very strong and potentially fun-sucking, but I will try it. For this video though, that's it. Overall, Sorcerer is very decent. With a few relatively minor tweaks, it could even be great. The largest thing is that Draconic needs some serious pumping, but I kind of think that's unlikely. 3 fun subclasses is enough for me though. Next up will probably either be Barbarian or Warlock, so subscribe so you don't miss those, and support me on Patreon if you want to see them early, or you just want to chat with me about them before the videos. Tell me if there's anything you think I missed in the comments. Bye!